Welcome back to another episode of Grit, Grace, and Growth, the podcast where we explore inspiring entrepreneurs, thought leaders, and change makers who are building their dream lives one step at a time. I'm your host, Laura Navaquin, and today we have an inspiring guest joining us. Imagine scaling your business to six figures while juggling the demands of being a full-time student. Sounds intense, right? Well, my guest today has done just that, and I'm thrilled to introduce you to Logan Montague, the founder and CEO of your Marketing BFFs and the host of Freedompreneur Podcast. Logan's mission is to help entrepreneurs and business owners find freedom in their business and ultimately live a life they love. With a background in working with businesses of all sizes, from startups to multi-billion-dollar corporations, Logan brings a holistic approach to marketing that's both realistic and tailored to your individual needs. In today's episode, we're going to dive straight into how she managed to balance her studies and scaling a business, the inspiration behind your Marketing BFFs, and some of the challenges and lessons that she learned along the way. Plus, of course, we cannot forget to talk about her podcast, the Freedompreneur Podcast, where she gives advice for aspiring entrepreneurs who are looking to find the same freedom in their own lives. So grab your coffee, settle in, and let's get started. All right, guys. So I had shared with you just prior to how Logan started, and she was a full-time student while growing and scaling her business to a full six figures. Of course, I know most of us are all wondering, how does she do that? Because growing a business in the first place is already challenging enough as it is, but scaling it to six figures is a whole other challenge. Logan, let me turn this over to you. I want to ask you the question that's probably burning in all of our minds. How did you grow and scale a business to six figures while being a full-time student?
Well, it definitely wasn't easy. It takes a lot of patience, a lot of discipline. I think discipline is the number one thing that always comes to my mind in anything in business, but especially when you're trying to manage multiple things at one time. And, a backstory a little bit. I've always been someone who likes to work, and I've also really enjoyed school. So that I think maybe was a little bit to my advantage when I started doing this. And so even as far back as high school, I always, as soon as I was turned 16 and could buy a cheap car and get from, my house to into town, because I live way out in the country in this really small town and I need to get into town to work. And I've always loved to work. And so I think just having that background of doing that from a young age, of wanting to work and balance school and make money, it's
Mhm.
always been a passion of mine. And then even when I went and did my undergrad, I worked 30 to 40 hours a week. I did a lot of that because I wanted to live off campus, and I had some scholarships that paid for my education, but I wanted to live off campus and live with some friends in a house. And that required, paying for rent and utilities and things that I had never paid for before. And so I ended up working almost full time while in my undergrad as well. And I went to my undergrad in 3 years. And so
Mhm.
I was, doing more than a full time course load there, working. And then I joined the workforce and worked in corporate marketing for 3 years. And that was a really high demand job and just trying to really balance a lot of things. So I've kind of always enjoyed a little bit of the high stress. But when I started my business, I really wasn't sure what was going to happen with it. I was like, okay, I'm going to start this business, but I kind of wanted a backup plan. So that's why I actually went back to school to get my MBA, and why I wanted to do it as quickly as possible, because I was worried that I needed a backup plan. Eventually, I kind of, about 3 to 6 months in, realized, okay, I actually think I can do this. And I don't necessarily think I need this as a backup plan, but I also wanted to continue learning and growing my business. So I continued with my MBA program and did that full time pretty much throughout that entire time period. And really towards the end, I was kind of like, I just want to get this done. So I kind of added on a few extra classes, but it really came down to a lot of discipline.
Mhm.
Like I said, having that background helped, of just really always balancing it. But um, I would structure my day, and I still do this today, even though I don't have school sometimes. And even now, sometimes I'm like, I need more. um, But, I do have to remember though, I don't have a family. I don't have children to take care of or anything like that. I think it would be for anyone listening, that has those extra pressures at home, this would be even more challenging. Although I did go to my MBA program with plenty of parents who were working full time, were trying to start businesses as well, and had families. And I give all the props to them because I'm like, that's amazing. But for the most part, for me, the way that I've always kind of done it is making sure that my day is structured in a way that
Mhm.
works for me. And it's not always necessarily what is considered proper or what society says like you should do, especially when I was getting my MBA. The classes were in the evening, but that
Mhm.
would mean I would, typically work all day. And when I was first growing my business, I didn't have as much going on during the day because I didn't have like as many client meetings yet. And so I had a little bit more flexibility there. But once I started to grow my business and I was really bringing on more clients, balancing school and business became really tough. And I had to be super disciplined. So I
Mhm.
would go to class. Usually classes I started at 6:30 and they were usually like 2.5, 3 hours. So I wouldn't get home until almost 10 o'clock at night. And then
Mhm.
I would usually still have work to do. And so I would stay up until 2, 3, sometimes 4 o'clock in the morning working because I've always been a more creative person at night anyway.
Okay.
But then I would go to sleep super late and I naturally would sleep in. And for a long time, I felt like I was lazy or not doing what I was supposed to do, but I really just had a whole productive night and I went to school. So I might sleep
Mhm.
in until 10 in the morning and then I would work from 10 until usually like 3 o'clock, and I would take a break for myself, go work out, go to the gym, try and get my mind right. And then I usually had class 3 to 4 nights a week. So that was just kind of my routine of being disciplined. And, sometimes in there was a time block of, okay, I'm working on my business from this point, I'm working on client work at this point, and then for these next few hours, I'm working on homework for school because I had tons of projects. The other thing about that is in my MBA program, and I think a lot of programs are like this as well, it's a lot of group projects. And so you have a lot of people's schedules working against you, and you have to kind of be flexible in that because you have people who are working full time jobs, who have parents, who have kids. And so I found myself just being really disciplined with my time and structuring my days in what made sense for me and just kind of ignoring what everyone else said I should be doing.
Yeah. And I think that you make a really great point as far as having that time block, because I really think that helps so much more than people give it credit for sometimes. I myself have always really worked closely with a calendar. So even if I made adjustments through that throughout the day, but worked closely with the calendar, and similar but different than yourself, I wasn't growing a business. I got my MBA while working full time. So I would get home at night, do my night classes, stay up at night, I would maybe make like a tea or coffee sometimes at night, because then I would go and do all my homework and then go to bed around midnight, 1, 2, or 1 in the morning, get up and go to work and do it again. But I didn't have kids back then, and it worked. And then even now with kids, I wake up in the morning, I try to wake up earlier and I time block even throughout the day, because if not, I'll get lost working on one project that may take a little longer than planned, or I mean, I have changed my mind as far as my ideas or whatever it may be. And then I'll look at the time like, oh, I've been working on this 3 hours and it should have been 1 hour. Because if I just stayed focused and didn't get distracted or starts going down, the tunnel as far as other ideas of whatever it may be that I start looking up and researching. But I feel like time blocking really does help. It's so significant in being productive throughout the day as well, and getting those to-do tasks checked off on your list. Well, that's great, but you scaled a six-figure business. So, congratulations to you. That is amazing.
Thank you.
Well,
Yeah, it was tough. I will be honest, and in the same point, I that was when I said I really went and got my MBA at first as a backup, but I also got a business coach at the same time as like, this is what I really want to do to scale my business, but I'm going to
yes.
have this MBA as a backup. And so I was kind of also simultaneously going through a business coaching program as a group program that was really for people wanting to grow online marketing agencies. And this was in 2020, 2021. And so this was kind of like during the height of COVID and everyone's working online. And so there was tons of resources and I really took those and just ran with it. And I mean, I won't lie. It was a hustle. I'm not really one for like hustle culture or anything too much, but I do think that when you're going to grow any kind of business, you do have to go all in if you want it to scale.
Yeah.
You do have to sometimes sacrifice your time or other commitments if you really want to see results, especially in the beginning. You know, the first 3 years, I worked a lot. And I'm not saying it was healthy or it was, exactly the way it should be. But now that I'm like 4, almost 5 years in, I can really allocate my time, especially now that I don't have, school or anything going on either. But I have a lot more free time. I have a little bit more time to relax and breathe. But in the beginning, when I was balancing it all, it was especially, during those time blocks, it was okay. How many jobs am I applying to on Upwork? Because that's where in the beginning I built the majority of my marketing agency. I don't necessarily use that as much anymore, but back then that was a really good tool. And so it was making sure that I am spending the next 20 minutes and I am getting these in. I am, making sure that I am showing up on social media for myself every single day in these, time blocks. I
Yeah.
am really just like living by a to-do list of not only having those time blocks, but like being as detailed as possible of the tasks I'm working on to really stick to those. I also, this is something I still struggle with, is like the scrolling, the doom scrolling on your phone, especially because I work a lot on social media. Sometimes I'm like, I'm on a client account or I'm doing something for myself. And then all of a sudden I find myself scrolling on my personal account. That's also been really helpful for me to have separate accounts though, as I do separate them so I can log out of one and go into the other one. But a lot of times I will now, like my phone is on do not disturb a lot. Sometimes I just leave it set off to the side or in another room. I even sometimes now, just to get content, set up your phone and record yourself working so then you can't be on it. You can't be scrolling and you're really just limited to those tasks. I set a lot of timers, reminders, and then living by that to-do list of the most detailed tasks, even if they're really small things, is what has always helped me, especially in the beginning and honestly even still today, just to make sure that you are getting done all of the little detailed things that need to get done to move your business forward. Because especially as you start to grow and scale, you start to get in this kind of like day to day. It depends on what kind of business you have. But for me personally, I work with a lot of clients. Well, in the beginning, I didn't have a team yet. And so I was trying to navigate, okay, well, now my time also has to be spent on client stuff, not just working on my own business. And so then you have to really understand how you're allocating your time and just make sure that you're really setting those days aside. So now I even have, and I kind of started these even back then, of like Mondays are typically my CEO days. That's where I'm not working on client work. That is just for me to work on things that are going to move my business forward. Or for some people, it might be one CEO hour of every day. It really just kind of depends on what works in your schedule. But that's something that I have found. And when you're really, really, really disciplined and stick to it, you start to see results.
Yes. And I love that you said that, because even again, tailoring or looking back on my own experience, I was working full time for a number of years up until 2023. And my husband and I, we started investing in real estate in 2015. And then we started a nonprofit in 2020, and then had some other businesses that we had going alongside. And they were all kind of growing for the past even a decade or so. But slowly, and we had a part-time person. They were growing, but it was very limited time that we can dedicate to them ourselves, being that we are parents and we had full-time jobs. But it wasn't until 2023 when I went into full-time entrepreneurship and thinking, well, I'm going into full-time entrepreneurship and taking this leap. So I got to make it work. I got to put my head down and really treat it like a job, not just like, oh, I'll work on it some days and, do whatever else I do throughout the day. But I really set and relied on that calendar. So every morning, as if I was going to work, even though I worked from home prior to, but I still acted like I was going to work for somebody else, and kept that discipline. And I really, truly say, I get asked this question pretty frequently. How did you grow your real estate portfolio, over 20 properties within 1 year? And how did you scale your business to this? And I always say my feeling that is three things. One was, again, the self-discipline. So I would go to the office, get the kids ready prior to go to the office. I was in the office every day, no later than 9 in the morning, start working. I'd have my calendar set. 2, stepping out of the comfort zone. So needing to constantly push yourself, or knowing for myself, there's certain things I didn't really like to do and some things I really didn't want to do type of thing, but pushing myself to step out of that comfort zone. And 3, get out there and networking, which I guess is tied into stepping out of your comfort zone, but just putting yourself out there as well more frequently to network, because all the different relationships that you make are just so great. You never know, someone that you meet may not directly relate to your business, but it could be a referral to your business in some other way, or teaching you something that you didn't even know you had to learn type of thing. And they, significantly, or a I'm getting lost in my own thought right now, but I highly do believe that that is why and how we were able to scale our business so significantly within 1 year. And then even fast forwarding to now we're like 15 months in since I left the corporate world and working in entrepreneurship, still again, incorporating the time blocking, which I wasn't really doing 100% before, but now with the time blocking, and even as you say, more so, I'll have certain days that are just emails, networks, whatever it may be, PR stuff. Other days I'm working on the book. Other days I'm doing client stuff. Other days I'm doing community stuff. So having those certain days or half a days just allocated to certain tasks within my business. So yeah, likewise, I can relate to that as well. And I wanted to ask you, so going to school, were you majoring in marketing?
Yeah, so I got my MBA with a focus in marketing, and that was
Uh-huh.
also my undergrad degree was also in business with focus in marketing and communications. So pretty much all I've ever done. I right out of school in my undergrad worked in corporate marketing for 3 years. So yeah, it's kind of what my background really has been in, and I take a little bit of a different approach to marketing than a lot of people, especially in today's digital world. So we're all about digital marketing. My marketing business, your marketing BFFs, is very digital forward focused, but I also still take a lot of principles from a more traditional approach and look at things holistically.
Mhm.
And look at, so if we're working with a client, for example, on like social media marketing, we also look at their bigger picture. So I look at their sales. I look at maybe their website. We look at their email marketing. We look at all these different things that their social media could be driving people to. Because
Mhm.
even though that is kind of like our core offering, social media management to me is not your core source of marketing. And so I really look at things holistically. Whereas
Mhm.
I think a lot of people in today's world look at, if you want to be a social media manager or marketing manager and just focus solely on social media, and they say, oh, you just need social media and you can grow your business to 6 figures. There's so many other things that go into that. And I think that's why we have seen so much success for our clients, and our clients have been able to grow from 6 figures to 7 and 8 figures.
Mhm.
And why, even for my own marketing success, has been having that background as well. Just because when I worked in corporate marketing, I actually worked in the RV industry, the RV and the outdoor industry. And that's a really traditional market. They're usually, this is just a fact, like no hate on them, but they're usually 8 to 10 years behind everyone else.
Yeah.
Every other industry, they just typically are. And so when I was working with them, we were still doing a lot of print advertising. We were still doing a lot of billboards. We were still doing, I worked for a $2 billion global company, but we were doing a lot of forward thinking things. Like, for example, we were doing influencer marketing back in 2017 before that was even a huge thing, but we were still doing a lot of these other concepts as well. And so I pull a lot of that stuff also into our marketing as a whole. And I'm not telling our clients like, hey, go buy print magazine advertisements. But for example, we have a lot of clients that have a local storefront. And I'm like, okay,
Mhm.
well, do you have a QR code at your checkout? Do you have, some
Mhm.
print materials that have QR codes that can direct people to your social pages? Do you have a somewhere on your social that they can join your email list? Are you sending those out regularly? It's a very
Mhm.
holistic thing. We look at their website traffic. We look at how everything is working together. And depending on the type of business, if it's a more service-based business, I'm like, okay, well, how's your sales team closing? Are we driving traffic to them and then they're not closing? Or are we
Mhm.
not giving them the traffic? We know there's so many different things that go into it, but that's really why I think too is just something I'm really proud of for myself actually is just that the way I have approached marketing and really educated myself on the holistic approach to it versus just what's out there today. And so there's no shame on anything. I think what's out there today is great, but I really like pulling in all aspects and having this kind of like 10-year approach of things, and then also looking to the future and really building the best strategy for everyone. I really feel like that's how most of our clients we've been able to grow them so significantly with that method.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that you shared why you're successful with your marketing BFFs and why many of your clients are successful with your holistic view and approach to that. But let's take a step back. Can you share a little bit more with me as far as what inspired you to start your marketing BFFs and how did your background influence that? So I know you had the degrees in marketing, but take it a step back. So what inspired you to start marketing BFFs and what inspired you to get into marketing in the first place?
Yeah. So when I was in college, I took my first marketing class. You go to college, you never really know what you want to study. I feel like you're 18 years old. And I was like, business, I'll just go for business, And my advisor actually, he taught all the marketing classes. I went to a really small liberal arts college. And so he was like, just take one of my classes and see. So I took his consumer behavior class and I was just instantly hooked. I loved learning about what got people interested, what, made businesses grow, brands grow, what attracted them. And so I just kind of fell in love with it. And then I just decided to get into marketing. And so I never really had any doubt after that I was going into the wrong area or anything. And so then when I started working in corporate marketing, I had the opportunity I was working for this really large company, but we had a really small marketing team. There was anywhere from like any point in time, depending on the year, from like 3 of us all the way up to like 10 of us, but just for the Americas. And we had tons of different divisions. And so a lot of times we were actually working with a lot of marketing agencies. And
Mhm.
so I got to kind of be that conduit between a lot of the agencies. And I would end up, working with them very closely, and I got to see how a lot of the agencies were working, and I really liked that model. I thought it was really fun on the brand side to manage them. Well, fast forward, in 2020, COVID happened. I unfortunately was laid off from my job because I did work for a global company, and so in the Americas they were like, hey, we have to cut people because just no one really knew what was going to happen. Turned out the outdoor and the RV industry actually ended up blowing up during that time because no one had anything else to do. But they weren't sure at first. And so I luckily was given a little bit of severance during that time. And so I had that summer to really kind of get things going. And I was like, okay, well, no one's really hiring right now in marketing because people
Mhm.
aren't sure what's happening, but people still need marketing. And so there was a lot of freelance things. And so I was like, well, I guess I'll just start doing that. And it kind of took off from there. And I actually had initially started with a business partner that didn't end up working out. It was one of my friends from college who also was working in marketing, had gotten laid off. We just had very different visions, values, and things like that. So eventually, I ended up kind of restarting in early 2021 completely on my own. And I really decided I wanted to grow that agency model and grow and turn it into your marketing BFS. That was kind of an evolution over time. But
Mhm.
um, I just kind of knew that after working on the flip side, on the brand side, and working with these agencies, that what was possible. And I had seen so many good examples of other agencies in getting to work with them that, I would go to their corporate offices in Chicago, in Indy, we had one in Montana, and I would go and work with their teams very closely. And so having that example was really helpful to me in seeing
Mhm.
how they work. And then I could kind of take that and make it my own and create my own marketing agency. So that was really fun for me and kind of what inspired me to do that. And I was following all of those agencies still on social media. I was still friends with a lot of people that worked there because I was working so closely with them. And I saw the success that they were having through COVID and that things were actually kind of trending more in that direction versus in house. And so that's really what inspired me to just kind of keep going and go in that direction instead of going back to another marketing job. The other thing is I was really kind of just tired of a 9 to 5. I knew in this route I could have that flexibility, create my own schedule, and really kind of have more freedom, which, is really kind of what my brand now today is all about. I have a podcast called Freedompreneur. It's so that's really, where my inspiration really came is once I kind of got a taste of that summer of, I didn't have a ton of stress. And I was like, ooh, I could do this full time and kind of live this life and travel and do whatever I want and take my work with me and work from anywhere, I was hooked. So
Yeah.
that's kind of where, how it all came about and where I kind of got that inspiration from. And even today, like if I don't feel super inspired, I usually take a trip and it fixes it real fast.
Yeah. So one thing that you said, and it brought curiosity to me. So I know that you've been in business now for 5-ish years, and you said that you initially started with a partner, and you ended up going your own way because you had a specific vision. So when you went into creating your marketing BFS with your vision, would you say that that vision has remained the same throughout the past handful of years, or has it evolved over time?
I think it's definitely evolved. My core values, my core mission is typically, I would say, it's remained the same. What I truly believe in helping other businesses, other entrepreneurs, get their businesses in a place where they can feel that sense of freedom for themselves. I think is what I was always after. I didn't necessarily have words for it in the beginning or know exactly what that concept was, but
Mhm.
yeah, for the most part, I would say like at its core is my values have remained the same, but my mission and the way I do things have definitely evolved. You learn as a business owner, you grow, you change. And I definitely have made a lot of shifts and pivots in business to adapt to that evolution from the beginning. But I think as long as, for me, staying true to my heart and what I initially set out to do. And there was even a time last year, I actually talked about this on my podcast as well, but earlier last year, like a year and a half ago, I found myself kind of unhappy and realized I had actually kind of strayed away from my vision initially. And I just was not happy. And I actually kind of scaled my business backwards a little bit and I've been doing this over the past year and a half. I'm right now at a place where we're going to start scaling forward again. I mean, we've still remained, well above 6 figures during this whole time, but it I was almost grew super fast in like year 2, in year 3, and I just got to this place where I realized I had lost sight a little bit and needed to take a step back and realign myself to that vision and kind of get back to my roots and my core values. And now we're at a place where we're going to actually start scaling it in a different way to
Mhm.
evolve in the way that I actually initially set out to do.
Great. Yeah, and that brings a thought to mind because I did want to ask you about obstacles that you have. And you went into that, with sharing that you found yourself naturally unhappy at that one point in time. Would you say that that was one of the toughest obstacles that you've had in growing your business so far, or just one of a few obstacles that you feel that you've encountered that have really challenged you?
I think in business, it's definitely one of the toughest obstacles I've faced. There've definitely been a few. Even as much as recently, I've been doing a ton of work to really make sure I am aligned. And that is a lot of really deep, more inner work personally. And that's actually been tough to navigate a business and managing and handling it all while you're also kind of personally going through a lot emotionally. And now we're coming out the other side and can implement all these things, and it's great, and everyone wants to be like, oh, it's sunshine and rainbows. But to be completely honest, this year has actually probably been the toughest year for me in business. It was not when I realized I was super happy or unhappy. That was tough. That was tough. It was like a tough pill to swallow. And I was also like, okay, I'm ready to take a step back and pour into myself and make sure that I am aligned with everything and that my team is aligned and that I really move things forward. But there was just a lot over this past year that I've actually had to face, just really mostly, it's all mostly mentally,
Mhm.
that have been really hard. There's always been things along the way. Like I remember probably 6 months into my business when I had first started hiring team members, one time I realized I couldn't make payroll. That was really hard. But that was a lesson learned and I moved on for that. I think a lot of those fundamental things are actually easier to recognize and go through than a lot of the really deep personal things when you realize you're unhappy. And so then that was kind of me like deconstructing things over the past year. And that's tough. It's tough to look at. And now I'm in a place where I feel good about moving things forward, but it's been tough, to be honest.
Yeah, and I think it's great that you realize that earlier on as well, to be able to make those changes and evolve and continue growing your business than get stuck. I feel like sometimes I have had conversations with entrepreneurs where they have a rut of this period within their business, but sometimes in most stories that I hear that it's a couple years or it's an extended period of time, and it's not necessarily a positive thing that you went through that, but that it was a short-lived period of time within your business, and that you were able to stay above six figures is a positive, and that you continued to make those changes and evolve and to continue moving forward within that, within your business.
Yeah,
I
yeah, it's
did
definitely
want
been a challenge, but we're coming out the other side.
Yes. And I look forward to seeing all the other things that your business has coming in the future, in the near future as well. But I did want to change lanes as well right now and talk about Freedompreneur, your podcast. And I know that I was, looking at your podcast online, reading about it, and I understand that it's about helping entrepreneurs find freedom in their businesses as well. I wanted to ask you, what motivated you to start this podcast, and also how does it align with your mission? And then I think that I kind of got that already a little as well, because you were looking for freedom with time within your day, and why you wanted to remain and be an entrepreneur as well. But can you share a little bit more about what motivated you to start Freedompreneur?
Yeah. So I think for a lot of business owners, freedom looks different for everyone. Everyone's story is different. And so that's why one, really wanted to bring on guests that can share their versions of freedom. Because every listener is going to resonate a little bit differently and might be able to take little tidbits that work for their life and implement it. And then also, I usually do solo episodes where I really get really real and raw and honest about what I'm going through personally as well. Like I don't sugarcoat anything. I'm like, here's what is what it is.
Mhm.
Here's what's working for me right now. This could change, but so that was kind of one thing, is I really wanted a space for people to just be open and honest about sharing their stories, their journeys, and the things they've gone through, and talk about a lot of the topics that people don't talk about, but how they have been able to use these situations and create a life of freedom for themselves and whatever that may look like for them. But,
Yeah.
coming up with that concept and deciding to do it, really, I didn't really have a plan for it, to be honest, until late last year. The idea came to me. I actually, this was in going through, trying to figure out what was next for my business, what I really wanted out of my business, how I could really help people, and getting back to alignment. And so something I was doing every single day during this time frame was I was doing nothing for 1 hour every single day. I would literally just sit there, do nothing, not listen to music, not my phone, nothing. Just sit there and just see what would come to me. And one of these days that I was doing this idea for this podcast, the ideas just started flowing in, and I just had all these things. And eventually I was like, I know I'm not supposed to be doing anything right now, but I just started writing all the ideas down, and eventually I had a whole plan for it. And but I didn't implement it right away. I kind of sat on it for, a few weeks, a month. And I talked to some of my mentors and, people in business, and said, do you guys think this is a good idea? Kind of got some feedback on it. And then earlier this year decided to implement it, because I felt
Yeah.
like it was something that really truly aligned to my vision for years to come, not only right now, but in the future as well. So it wasn't going to just be like a short project.
Mhm.
And something that I felt like was really missing from the space of having those conversations, and sharing people's stories in a different way that is, celebrates the wins, but also highlights the struggles people go through to get there.
Yeah. Yeah, I think similarly as well. I love your story, because even with this podcast, Great Grace and Growth, I mean, it was an idea that I had thought about going back maybe 2 years ago, and I've just sat on it for so long. And eventually one day I was jotting down in a notebook, well, actually over a couple of weeks, just different ideas of episodes and whatever it may be. And I figured, I'm getting asked these questions by people on social media or our website, or we have a community, a real estate community, getting asked these questions. Why don't I just go forth and do the podcast? Is there ever really a perfect day or perfect timing? I don't know. I don't know if I really believe that there's this perfect timing to jump into something new. You just kind of make it work type of thing. So I love that story as well.
Thank you.
Ask you. So, with our listeners who are just starting out, or especially those who might be in school now or balancing other commitments, what is one piece of advice that you would give them in balancing it all aside from the discipline? Is there anything else that you would say is critical that they take and run with? A piece of advice you'd be able to give them?
I think the biggest piece of advice I would give them outside of the discipline would be to give themselves grace, is to not be too hard on yourself because things are always going to be changing and evolving. And
Mhm.
also understand that everything's a season. Nothing is forever. So if you're in a really hard season and you're trying to balance it all, or if like you have an idea, but again, like you said, it's not the right time, which there's never a right time. Sometimes it's just start and figure it out. But give yourself grace. And especially if you are wanting to start something new, start the business, start anything new, give yourself grace in that, but also know that everything is figure outable. You can figure it out. It's gonna be hard,
Yeah.
but and you might fail is what people might say, but if you don't give up, you literally can't fail.
Yeah.
So it's just figuring it out and just continuing to go, and take a step back sometimes. If you've been beating your head against a wall and you're frustrated, take a step back and go do something for yourself and come back later with a fresh set of eyes or ears or
Mhm.
heart, whatever it may be. And yeah, just give yourself that grace that things aren't always going to be perfect, but you can definitely figure it out.
Yeah, I love that. I love that piece of advice. And I share this with even my own children, but I often say this, that there's no such thing. And I really don't believe that there's a such thing as failure. Really, when you have these little setbacks along the way, there really are lessons along the way because there's so much you can learn from that, or, how not to do it in the future, or what didn't work and what I need to change to attempt that again. And really, when is there failure? Failure is maybe when you just give up and you just don't pursue it anymore. Then maybe you failed at that goal because you're no longer pursuing it, type of thing. So I love that. One last question that I have for you is, if you can go back and give your younger self one piece of advice, what would it be?
Ooh, I think it would be to block out all the noise, not listen to what other people say you can and cannot do,
Yep.
because unless they have done things exactly the way you want to, which no one ever is going to live your life, is going to be in your exact shoes, they don't know what they're talking about. People can give you advice, people can definitely help you along the way, but block out all the noise of the people who are saying you can't do something, you can't do something a certain way. Like you can do it however you want.
Yeah.
So that would be my biggest piece of advice, because I did so many things of like what I should do. And that's actually when I found myself the unhappiest, is when I realized I had scaled this business and was super
Mhm.
unhappy. It's because I was listening to the noise of everyone saying, you can't do it this way, you should do it this way, you should, like all these different things, like you're not successful if you don't do this. And I realized I was unhappy. And so that's when I was like, all right, well, time to deconstruct this and go do it my own way.
Yeah.
And so that would definitely be, I think, my biggest piece of advice for my younger self. And even, even when I was way younger in anything in life, is just to
Mhm.
trust your own voice. Trust your own voice, trust your own opinions and hearts and thoughts. You can't go wrong.
I absolutely love that. I would say that's something that I struggled with for the longest time, and still, although I've made significant strides moving out of that and not taking other people's opinions or feedback to heart necessarily, and taking it as a grain of salt and just continue moving forward, it's still something that I constantly have to personally remind myself of. So I absolutely love that piece of advice.
Thank
Okay,
you.
well, Logan, it's been amazing to hear about your journey and um, your journey along the way. And your story really is inspiring on how you balance school and scaling a business to six figures and following your dreams. But for our listeners who want to connect with you and learn more about your marketing BFFs, where can they find you?
Yeah, so you can follow us on Instagram or Facebook. It's at Your Marketing BFS. You can also contact me directly. I'm really active on Instagram and TikTok, which is at socially.logan. And you can also check out the Freedompreneur Podcast, which on Instagram is just at Freedompreneur Podcast, or any podcast platform is just at Freedompreneur. Um, but yeah, those are all the places, pretty active on all of them. So we have lots of options there. And yeah.
All right, perfect. And yeah, all of these links will be directly in the show notes. So you'll have no trouble finding her contact information. So go out and subscribe to Freedompreneur Podcast, visit Your Marketing BFF's website, and follow Logan on social media for more insights and tips. And thank you for joining us on this episode of Grit, Grace, and Growth.
Thanks so much for having me.
Logan, thank you so much for joining us today on this episode of Grit, Grace, and Growth to share your insights on scaling a business while being a full-time student. Your journey really is a testament to what's possible with determination and a clear vision. To our listeners, I hope that Logan's experience has sparked new ideas and motivation for your own business endeavors. Remember, finding freedom in your business is about making choices that align with your values and goals. Be sure to give Logan a follow. We've included all her links below in the show notes. Thank you for spending your time with us on this episode of Grit, Grace, and Growth. If you found value in our discussion, please subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with your network. Your support helps us bring more insightful conversations to the airways. So stay tuned for our next episode, and remember to keep cultivating your grit and grace on your path to growth.